Hey, it's Danica Patrick. Enjoy this episode and use code LINUX and save when you check out at GoDaddy.com.
And welcome to the Linux Action Show, Season 24, Episode 8. My name is Chris.
And my name is Matt.
Well, hey there, Matt. Guess what? I think we have a big show today. Our main topic is Proxmox. We've been talking about it for a couple of weeks. Now, if you're not familiar, Proxmox is a free software-powered enterprise-grade virtualization solution that combines KVM and openVZ, which is sort of like a jail system. Maybe you might be familiar with that. All running on top of Debian, and it's free for you to use. And because this system it's one of these things that once we start explaining it to you, if you're not familiar with it, I think it's going to click with you in some of the different ways. You could really have some fun with this, or actually use it in a business to accomplish the scope of that review today. Later on, in the second half of the show, two gentlemen will be joining us who have worked with Proxmox day in and day out for a long time now. They're going to talk about how they use centralized storage, some of the decisions they went through to come to Proxmox, and all those types of things will be in that, plus my impressions. So that's going to be a big segment. That might be an oversized segment, Matt. You just don't.
I think it's going to be a big segment.
Big segment. Then we also have a ton of great emails at the end of the show, some great Q&A stuff, and I'm going to give you my first impressions of my new Bonobo, right? That's how you say it?
Ooh, I think
Extreme,
so. I call it big, awesome, wonderful, envious, I want one laptop.
It's a bit of a monster, and I had it for a couple of days, and thankfully, like, the Linux gods aligned, and I also got my legit Steam invite, so I got the laptop one day, and then I got Steam the next day. I tell you, Matt, it took a lot of self-control to focus on Proxmox. I'll tell you, it really did. But before we get to all that, it's our picks segment. So why don't we start with the Runs Linux this week? First up, I love this one. It was posted over at OMG Ubuntu. The Wii U demo booths run Linux? Yeah, somebody has a screenshot of it here. Now, don't get too excited. They're not actually like running. They have an Ubuntu boot screen here in the shot. They're not actually running Ubuntu then with like some sort of Wii U emulator. What it actually is when the Wii U booths are idle, they loop video and playback media, and they download updates and stuff like that. And that's what this is, right? This is when the Wii U isn't engaged, or if it's a booth that has a demo Wii U unit that isn't actually working, like they have empty Wii U units with controllers and stuff. If it's one of those booths, it's actually running Ubuntu Linux with like video demos and stuff like that to give it some sort of animation. So pretty cool, and it's an interesting way. Yeah, it was pretty great. So, anyways, that's a cool one. You check out a link to that, and when you walk by a Wii U booth now, you'll look at that and go, "Oh, that might be running Linux."
And you get to tell random people about it as they walk by, because you know they're like, "What's this Linux thing you're talking about?" It's like, "Oh man, check this out, it's great."
Oh yeah, you see that runs Linux, really? It does, yeah. and now, like, I'm going to be the geek. Like, I'm going to be looking, and I'm going to like see if there's a way I can get it to reboot, so that way I can get like a camera phone snap of the boot screen or something like that. Kick out the power cord. All right, Matt. So we have some great picks today. In fact, one is our Android pick was made by a longtime viewer of the show, and man, oh man, is it perfect for the Linux Action Show crowd because it's very Linux specific. I can't wait to tell you about that. But before we go, I want to say good morning to our sponsor, GoDaddy.com.
Morning.
Hello, GoDaddy. Thank you, GoDaddy, for your longtime sponsorship. They are the world's #1 domain name registrar, and they're going to enable you. They're going to make you better at making an impact online. I think that's not quite the slogan. They probably should refine that.
But just, mold it down a little bit.
They might want to tighten that up a bit. I'm just saying. Anyways, so as you guys know, Saturday nights are fun for me because I always get to chat with Danica on the phone, and she's a big Linux advocate. And we were saying, Danica, what are some of the ways that we could sort of work together to spread Linux adoption? And she had a great idea.
GoDaddy loves Linux, so use offer code LINUX when you check out at GoDaddy.com.
And I said, Danica, that's a great idea. Using the code Linux when you check out, you're saving money and you're saying Linux at the same time, and that's cool. But it's the holiday seasons. People are tight on the budgets. Maybe they want to throw up just a quick blog. Can we sweeten the deal? And this is later on when we were texting, because once we get off the phone, we usually text for a couple of hours. You know how it is, Matt. She said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. This is great. She says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hook the Linux Action Show audience up with a $2.95.com. $2.95 from the GoDaddies. Go over to GoDaddy.com, and when you're checking out, use our promo code Linux295, and you will get a .com for $2.95. You can get up to 3 domains at $2.95, and then after that, it's just $7.99 for additional domains, which is still a really great deal.
Yeah.
So GoDaddy is really opening up the promo canon with this one. So folks, go over there and check that out. And even if you don't need a .com, if you just want to support our show, click the link in our show notes to let GoDaddy know that you are thankful for them rocking support of the Linux Action Show and keeping us on the air. But really, at $2.95, that's cheaper than an app. You know, that's cheaper than a lot of things these days, unfortunately.
That's couch money, man.
It's ridiculous.
Totally.
I have that floating around in my PayPal account. I could just go buy something with the spare change in PayPal to pay for that. So thank you to GoDaddy.com for supporting the Linux Action Show. And, folks, thank you for using our code Linux295. Matt, we've got the live stream here with us today.
All right.
We do this show Sundays at 10 a.m. Pacific over at jblive.tv. And, of course, if you are on the East Coast, that's 1 p.m. Pacific or 6 p.m. in the UK, well, at least in London. Yeah. And you guys help us stay on the straight and narrow. So thank you to everybody who joins us in the chat room. And, Matt, what do you say I cover my Android app pick this week?
Let's get to that Android app pick.
All right, so this one I have a little email that goes with it because the developer wrote into the show and because he's a fan of the show. But first, let me tell you about the app. It's called Drive Droid.
Droid, okay.
There's 2 different versions. There's a pay version and a free version. And what Drive Droid does, and I would imagine it only works on some Android devices, but it works on the Nexus 7. That's what I tried it with.
Okay.
Drive Droid essentially turns any Android device that supports it into a ISO downloading Linux USB CD-ROM emulating device. So you get on the screen. You can load any ISO you want manually, but they also have a built-in menu system here where you can say, all right, I want to download OpenSUSE or I want to download Ubuntu or whatever it is. It downloads the ISO from the mirrors, loads it onto your SD card, and then it turns on a USB emulation. You plug it into your PC and you boot off of your Android device.
Hello. I like that.
So you save yourself a CD, or you save yourself the trouble of using like UNetbootin to write it to a USB thumbstick, which is usually my preferred approach now. And the great thing about it is if you have a decent Wi-Fi connection, and I got the 32 gig Nexus just to kind of play with stuff like this.
Yeah.
This is great for this. So, but this is fun. So here's something that might be, if you guys are kind of thinking about maybe trying this. Bob is the creator of the app, and he wrote. I also got a comment from a fellow Redditor. He I think talked about a little bit this on our subreddit, and so he added the Siltaz distribution. Now check this thing out, man. I don't know how I'd never heard of this. Yeah, it is a very slick live or installable distribution. Its purpose, the default ISO is only 35 megabytes. It initially loads completely into RAM, so you can use your USB port or CD drive for other stuff. It also will boot over the network if you have the right setup. The 35 megabytes includes a web browser, Midori, several text editors, MT Paint, Transmission, Chess, Sudoku, and its own powerful package manager. As an added bonus, configuring the system can be entirely done through a web browser, and it can connect to a local server. That means you can configure the system from another PC, like a browser, and just bring it up and do that. Needless to say, it's pretty awesome, and it's a great way to try Drive Droid out. With 35 megs, that'll download real quick. And it's just right here in the app's menu, which is really cool.
Oh, I love that. I'm gonna if that could work on my phone, I am a happy camper. I hope so. Oh, that would be so cool.
I bet it will. Try it.
I bet it will.
You can get it for free. The free version has ads. The pay version, you support the developer, and there's no ads. Yeah. And we'll have a link to it in the show notes. Check out Drive Droid. In the
definitely.
Android.
I mean, hey, if it works, I'm down.
Yeah, man. All right, so this week I was taking a lot of screenshots for the Proxmox segment, and I've been wanting to talk about it. I've mentioned a few before in the past, but I've never really been happy with any of the screenshot utilities that are out there for Linux, because I usually want to store the album somewhere that is accessible remotely. If it's like I want to be able to link to it for somebody, or if I want to store it like in my Dropbox, that way when I'm out here in the studio, I can pull up all the images because I'm doing them back in my office when I'm prepping. And so the app that I want to talk about today is called ScreenCloud, and this is a screenshot utility for Linux, and it has it's very, very well integrated with online services. Now, it can store locally, but by default, it'll actually upload to your ScreenCloud account, and then it immediately, as the upload completes, puts a direct URL into your clipboard that you can just paste. That's very cool. Now, recently, they've just updated ScreenCloud to include uploading to other services. Now, again, you could save it to your local file system, or you could save it to an FTP or SFTP server.
Sure.
But now they've added Imager support, which I love personally.
Oh, yeah.
Dropbox support, and Ubuntu One support. So you can have it as you take a screenshot, just in the background, or it'll come up and prompt you for a title. It'll just save these off into these remote services, and then you just go collect them when you're done. It has all of your standard screenshot utility features like hotkeys that are really simple to remember. You can capture full screens. You can capture a selection of the screen or just a window. So here, I'll give you an example if you're watching the video. I'm going to capture, here's my Steam client, right? Okay, so I'll capture that. And because I got
and you're just selecting it with your mouse for audio listeners.
Yeah,
okay.
It draws a nice box around the device, around the area, and then you just hit enter. Now, when it comes up, it says, "Okay, what do you want to name this?" And I'm going to name it Steam.
Steam. Okay.
And then my options right here. Do you want to save it to Screen Cloud? Do you want to save it to Imager? And then it can even get more nuanced than that. If I save it to Imager, do I want to save it anonymously? Do I want to save it to my Imager account? Do I want to give me a link to the Imager gallery? Do I want to give me a direct link to the JPEG or the PNG? But I'll just say Screen Cloud. So I'm just going to save it to Screen Cloud, and I can say do this every time if I want. So it's nice and automated. It goes up, it uploads the file in the background. It's uploading right now. This is a high resolution screen, so it's a big file. But then when it's done, it ties right in with the notification system. And I get a little notification that, hey, your Screen Cloud upload is done now. If everything's worked correctly, I should be able to just I should just be able to go to my browser, hit paste, and boom, Bob's your uncle. Right on my clipboard is the screenshot that I just took.
Oh, so that's fantastic.
If you're in IRC or you want to do a quick screenshot post on Google Plus or Twitter, and you just want to take the screenshot and then boom, you get the URL and then you just paste it. Like you're in the middle of composing the tweet or the whatever it is. This is great for that because it's select, enter, boom, it's in your clipboard. That's literally the process. And you can do it with a keyboard combo, so you don't even have to use the mouse. It's like Control-Alt-F3, paste, and you're done.
Oh, I love that. And I love the fact it's got the automation to where it actually remembers, hey, you used the service last time. Do you want to use it continuously? That is a big time saver for me.
It looks like it's a hit with the live audience because the web page is having a bit of a problem to load. Now, just as a bit of a disclaimer, your mileage may vary on this particular aspect of it. On stock Ubuntu 12.10, which I have here on the new Lappy, I got errors when I added the Dropbox, Imager, and Ubuntu One services, and I installed it from the Software Center in Ubuntu. On Mint, right here on this machine, I downloaded the 64-bit deb from the Screen Cloud website, and I don't have any issues. So
I wonder if there might be, sometimes for the 12.10 stuff, I've been seeing a lot of people coming out with PPAs. They make an adjustment, and then they PPA it out. I'm wondering if that might be happening. Could happen. I mean, there could be such a thing as a PPA out there we're just not aware of that maybe has addressed that issue. And if that's the case, that'd be awesome.
You can also, there's really no reason. They also post the Ubuntu deb up on their site and the Mint deb, and they're probably the same thing. In fact, let me see. They link to the same file. They link to the same exact file. So you could, if you have issues with that after you install it from Software Center, uninstall it from Software Center, and then just go grab it from their site.
Sometimes it's a little fresher, maybe.
Maybe, or who knows, right? Who knows, Matt? It's the wild ways of the Software Center. All right, so that's Screen Cloud, and thank you to who is the developer? I didn't get their names. I should have gotten their names before I started because it's a really great app, and
it's a fantastic.
It's really it's specifically. I think I'm gonna use it probably almost every time we have a review segment now. So thanks to I'm not grabbing their name, but thanks to those guys, it's a really good app.
Worst case scenario, we'll try and at least get it in the show notes. So
yeah, I'll try to do that. All right, Matt. Well, before we run, I just want to remind folks that they can help these shows stay on the air, especially during the holiday shopping season, by using our affiliate system. You guys know about this. At the bottom of JupiterBroadcasting.com, we have links to Amazon US, UK, DE, eBay, Newegg, ThinkGeek, Best Buy, Mint.com, which is probably not a bad idea during the hode season to kind of keep track of things. Audible, which if you have an Android device, they have a great app, and now it also has Whisper Sync. And we have a Code School, which is a great online learning site for development, and we have browser extensions too, which have even more affiliates. And here's the deal. You just use those when you're shopping, and a portion of your shopping session is contributed to Jupiter Broadcasting. It doesn't impact your budget, but it helps finance these shows, and then we're audience funded, and that's really cool. So thank you to everybody who does that. And I've gotten word recently from some Linux admins out there and some IT guys who do some purchasing from Amazon for their business, and they added the extension to help us out, and that's awesome. You guys.
Well, and for the audience members have been asking, Matt, where do you get that crazy background? ThinkGeek, man, I'm telling you, they got this sucker.
That's right.
Totally available. It's awesome.
All right, Matt. Well, since we got such a big show, I think that's everything we have in the top of the show. So let's do the news.
Hey, what's new in the news?
All right, Matt. Our top story is a little bit of hubbub that got shuffled up on the web this week. It got submitted to our subreddit and was both times one of the top voted stories this week. The Humble THQ bundle has arrived. And the big upset here, Matt, is no Linux support. And people reacted badly to this. They were pretty surprised. And, of course, there's DRM involved and all this kind of stuff. And I was surprised at the tone of the backlash that I saw on some of the forums online. Not in the Linux Action Show Reddit, but on some of the other ones, people were very angry, almost like they felt betrayed, it seemed like to me. Well, because I thought these guys were about porting to Linux and things like that.
Well, I think that a lot of times Linux users as a whole, and I'm certainly amongst this group, I'm part of this, that we perhaps we see these things progressing in our favor, and then there's a concern that, oh no, maybe we're backtracking because there's emphasis on things we don't support, such as, DRM or other platforms. And so I think the backlash was definitely overstated. It was people got way too bent out of shape about it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, as long as they're not retracting what they've already done, I think people just need to let it go.
And this isn't the Humble Indie bundle, and I think that's something that people are getting confused with.
Exactly.
And the other thing is people don't, I think, quite have the full context of what the Humble bundle has done for gaming on Linux, and to sort of just be all of a sudden like just to turn on them on a dime like that seemed a little excessive. Now, to transition this story, there was recently over at cheerfulghost.com an interview with Ryan C. Gordon about Linux gaming. Now, Ryan C. Gordon has been involved with a lot of ports for games to Linux and the Mac platform, but he's working really hard right now because of Steam. He's gotten a lot of new business. And he's worked a lot with the Humble bundle. He's been responsible for getting a lot of the bundle games on the Linux platform. And he was interviewed, and they had a couple of good nuggets I wanted to pull out here. So here's one in regards to the Humble bundle. It says, recently you worked with the folks at the Humble bundle porting games to Linux. How has that experience been? Do you think that the indie gaming scene is having an effect on Linux adoption, or at least Linux gaming? And his response to this, which I thought, solid question, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Very good question, actually.
The Humble bundle is really great to work with, he says. No one is advocating the Linux platform more than they are. And something like 25% of their revenue comes from Linux gamers. So it's really paying out for them. When we think about the Humble bundle, we tend to think about the Humble Indie bundles.
Right.
And these have given developers several million reasons to be interested in Linux.
I think the biggest issue, now that you read it in that way, I think the real issue that happened was, and as he rightfully pointed out, is the indie bundle versus the Humble bundle. I can't even say it. It's a branding issue. The association, as you pointed out earlier, it's blended together. They sound so similar.
Yeah.
They need to find a way to really differentiate the titles because they're trying to obviously work with the existing title and saying, to get people excited about it, but it's backfiring.
And they want to leverage their brand, man. They want to leverage.
And that can blow up on you if you're not careful.
Yeah. One other point that I just want to touch because it's interesting, especially as more games are coming to Linux. They say, the Cheerful Ghost interviewer goes on to say, one of the major reasons publishers and developers give for not releasing Linux versions of their games is that the demand doesn't justify the extra development costs. We've heard that, we've heard that
many times.
Yeah. Having been involved with this process numerous times to do this very thing, what do you think about this stance? So he's asking this guy whose job it is to port games to Linux, right?
Right.
Great question. Yeah. So Ryan goes on to say, I think it's short-sighted by the companies. Right. A one-man team, a.k.a. me, can make a completed game, port it to Linux, and it's usually pretty fast and cheap. If they concerned themselves with portability right from the start, there'd be no problem at all. Maybe have a single Linux or Mac guy, whatever your target is, developer on the team, who would be responsible for that platform, but otherwise is just building the game the same as everyone else. And he goes a little bit architecturally about how games can be designed to make it really easy to port them.
So he's not only providing the reasoning for doing so, but he's also providing some actual ideas and tools to do so. And that's kind of cool.
And you can tell he's got to that point where he just has a practical experience. You just do it like this. He talks about the way he his first approach when he sits down at a game for the first time before it's ever been ported is his first goal is just I make it compile. And if during the compile it dies somewhere, I go in there and I comment out whatever's making it not compile, and I leave myself a note to come back to, and I just keep moving on until it builds. And then once it builds, I get a huge list of all these things I have to return back to. And sometimes there's something small like a UI tweak, and sometimes it's like the 3D rendering path that has to be changed. But that's how he does it. And he says it just takes time. It's hard to totally guesstimate how long it's going to take until you go through that process, but it's doable by a one-person team, so that's not that expensive.
Well, and it seems like he has a practical guide. I mean, the actual path to progress here is actually doable, that if you simply follow this guy. I see consulting in this man's future, honestly, for gaming companies. I really do. Because, I mean, for, what he says is common sense. A lot of gaming companies probably haven't put this together. Honestly.
Do you remember during the first impressions Steam review that we did, I commented how I felt like the games on Steam were switching in and out of full screen better than any games on Linux had before.
Oh, yeah.
And then it felt first class. Well, it turns out they actually did quite a bit of work on that. And I just want to cover that, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, definitely.
So Sam Latinga, this is from Ryan, he's talking about his buddy Sam, is working for Valve. And Valve is using Sam's SDL library for their games. He says, this is great. One of the things they wanted to work on is better full-screen games. Right now, it's sort of a mess. The application takes over the screen, changes the resolution, and then maybe crashes, leaving your desktop mangled, or cleans up and leaves all of your windows crunched down. The problem is the wrong thing is in charge of the resolution change. Right? The game's in charge, and so the system isn't really aware of what's going on. He went back to talk about how he came up with a spec on how this should be done, submitted it to the free desktop and GNOME folks, and began working with those teams, and now the patches are being applied to GNOME to make this a much simpler handoff.
I like it.
It's another example of how even though Valve is targeting, Ubuntu right now, and even though it's a proprietary commercial software, I still think having a popular product with a lot of really good engineers working on the Linux platform, it's, we're getting way better drivers, way better. I have the new driver on this system. It's amazing. It is amazing. It's incredible. And then we have improved gaming for anyone who's going to be using this new standard spec that they wrote up. And he talks about how they wrote the spec and they sent it into the mailing list, and then they went on this, back and forth collaboration process that went on for a little while, but he says at the end of it, they had a way better spec. And he said it was just this incredible exchange between what they wanted to do and what the community wanted, and everybody came out with this much better end result. It's going to be way better for Linux users in the end. So
exactly. And I think if people can maintain focus on it and not nitpick the silly little stuff, it's going to be better for everybody. And I'm excited. I think this is an exciting time for the Linux desktop overall. I really do.
He goes on to point out that with the Humble Bundle, Indie Bundle, and with Unity 3D now, with their latest version now making it easy to port to Linux, and with Valve, he thinks that 2013, and he's been doing this. He was the guy that ported Unreal Tournament 2003 or whatever it was. That was like his first big game, or 2004, whatever. So he's been doing this for a long time now, and he thinks 2013 is the best looking year for Linux gaming that he's ever seen.
I'm in agreement on that.
Yeah,
honestly.
he says we've built a good foundation for it, and I'm excited, and we're going to be covering it right here on this show. So. All right, Matt. Well, this next just kind of fits in with gaming. We'll just cover it really quickly.
Sure.
The Indie City is coming to Linux. This is another video game distribution platform like Desora or Steam. This one also incorporates a tip jar system where you can tip developers, and obviously by the name, they focus on indie games. And so it's Indie City, and it's coming to Linux soon, and they're looking for beta testers. They have contact information in the blog post that we'll link. So if you'd like to get involved with that, and I think, the indie gaming scene is just getting so awesome, and the Linux has more of an impact there because they're dealing with a much different scope of clients.
Oh, definitely. Well, I think it's exciting to see where that develops, and the more of these things come to fruition, the better.
Yeah. All right, Matt. Now this next story got headlines everywhere. I think it was one of the #1 voted stories in our subreddit. But it left a little bit of disappointment at the end, although it could be a good start. And that is Dell has announced a Ultrabook that comes preloaded with Ubuntu. Now, they're calling it a developer edition. Now, you might remember we talked about the Dell Sputnik project a while ago. Yeah. And Michael on Coder Radio got one of those.
Okay.
He did a full review on Coder Radio about it. And his main takeaway, and this was my main takeaway, was it's got some good specs, right? It's got an i5 or an i7 in there. You can get a 256 gig SSD, and it's a good one. It's got I think 8 gigs of RAM. I can't remember exactly. But the bummer is the screen.
Right.
The screen resolution. See, I think Ubuntu specifically and Unity are actually a really good combo for an Ultrabook, and I think this Linux Ultrabook market could be big, and I'd love to see every vendor get into this. But it's at $1,400. They've already lowered the price. They've already, since they announced this 2 days ago, lowered the price by like $100. And the bumper is it's a 1366 by 768 resolution. Now, for some workloads, that's totally fine. So, if that's fine for you, that's good. For developers, though.
Well, and not only for developers, but developers coming from proprietary operating systems that have an expectation of a certain resolution, and then coming to this desktop and saying, "Oh, wow, that's not what I was expecting." That can be a little bit of a shock, maybe.
Now the Dell guys are working on. I think they've already submitted like drivers upstream, so it's going to be it should be making its way into distributions, and it ships with Ubuntu 12.04.
Okay.
I think I think. My hesitation here is if because of the price, it's almost $1,500 stock,
pricey,
and because of the low resolution, I'm just worried it's going to be a non-starter, and then Dell will look at that and go, "Oh well, Linux-powered Ultrabook sales are in the toilet. We're not going to bother with it." And when it really is kind of a failure of execution.
But see, this has been my gripe with you remember back in the old days when Linspire was running their various desktops and things like that. They were running a lot of underpowered machines. Then, of course, the other guys came in and did better. But with Dell specifically, I would say most specifically, Dell's biggest crime in the Linux space for desktops is that they'll ramp up, kind of even quasi-promote it, and then just completely drop back like nothing ever happened. I remember that happening distinctly to where they were dropping products left and right. The support was mediocre. I'm very hesitant in recommending that to people just because of that fact. I'm concerned where is that going to end up? So it's like, okay, they got this this setup that you can buy. How well supported is it going to be? Are they going to really offer long-term support? I have some concerns there. I really do.
That's my take. My take is wait and see how Dell does with version 1 of this. See if early next year they up it to a different resolution. I know you're not also big on the whole Ultrabook form factor, and it's funny because I have a very large 17-inch laptop here.
Right.
If I had all the money in the world, I'd also own an Ultrabook. Because I have very specific needs for a big, powerful laptop, but I also need portability from time to time.
Right.
So I think if they refine it a bit, maybe at the 2013 sometime they can come out with something that has a higher resolution, maybe a little lower in price. Now, some people in the IRC chat room are saying that resolution is just fine for them. But for me.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a case by case. Here's what I would do if I was Dell. You know how you go to the Ubuntu website and you can test out Ubuntu and see what that looks like? How cool would it be to go to the Dell website and actually get an idea what that resolution is going to feel like before you ever enter your credit card number? Problem solved, vetted the customer, you're good to go. Yeah. Easy.
All right, Matt. Now, this next story can be parsed in a lot of different ways, but thankfully we're going to parse it in the pro Linux way. No. Actually, that's not us so much as ServerWatch and of course, the IDC. So according to IDC and Gartner, who both came out with reports this last week, the worldwide server market in the third quarter of 2012 was $12.2 billion in revenue, which is actually a 4% year-over-year decrease. Gartner also reported, so we have both IDC and Gartner. Gartner also reported that while revenue is down, shipments of actual hardware are up by 2.8%. So revenue on servers is down, shipments is up. Now, that's partially because of the way Microsoft has changed some of their licensing structure. Yeah. But here's what's interesting, Matt, is not all sectors of the global server market are in decline. In particular, IDC noticed that the Linux market is growing. Linux server hardware revenues for the third quarter of 2012 were reported at $2.6 billion for a 6.0 year-over-year gain. Microsoft Windows Server hardware declined by 0.9% to $6.2 billion. Now, it's still quite a bit more billions, but they also charge a bit more. And Unix servers declined by 14.2% to just $2.1 billion. They also saw growth in x86, and both IBM and HP's servers were doing well. How Dell held the third spot, and Oracle held the fourth spot in terms of operating system vendors. Interesting, huh? It's
very interesting. I think it'd be interesting to watch the trends and then do a comparison in a 3-month window, 6-month window, and maybe a 1-year window, and see where see what the trends really are long term. Because short term can get a little spotty. Sometimes that can be some mixed
we're looking at
there.
1 quarter here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, the other thing that I didn't run it last week, but there was a story that showed that the Ubuntu server market is exploding. And the tricky thing there is that type of stuff doesn't show up in these reports, right? Red Hat sales and Oracle Linux sales and Microsoft Windows sales and HP UX sales, those show up in this report. But when somebody downloads Ubuntu LTS and then maybe a year down the road or a month down the road buys a support package, that doesn't show up as revenue in these reports. So it's also, it doesn't really factor in for CentOS. And as anyone who's worked in the hardware business or worked with servers for a long time and ordered a lot of hardware and worked with a lot of hardware vendors, you also know that almost every server now is sold with the no operating system choice. I mean, Windows or Linux, you don't generally ship it with an operating system on there. You can, but it's not the majority of shipments. So it
really
also,
numbers could skew all over the place. It sounds like, you know?
Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is take it with a grain of salt, but the trend is our friend at least.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, this next story popped up all over online. It was reported as such: new kernel vulnerabilities that affect Ubuntu OSs. And it goes on to say, Ubuntu's issued patches. You need to go update. By the way, there's an ABI change, so you'll have to reload proprietary drivers perchance too. Here's what I can't quite figure out. This is just a kernel level bug. I mean, it's also in the Red Hat. I'm looking right here. I have the Red Hat bug database up. It's been discussed on the Red Hat mailing list. I don't understand every website, and I don't know if this is just like lazy press, but every website's reporting it as an Ubuntu kernel vulnerability. And I'm like, I was thinking, my first reaction is, what the hell did Ubuntu do to their kernel that no other distro is doing, right? What they stick in there,
Well, I think it's not so much it's lazy press. It's you're talking about writers and editors and speaking two different languages. The writers a lot of times will come into it and say, oh, it's a Linux issue. Editors are saying, yeah, it's not real sexy. Let's dress that up a little bit and let's get some Ubuntu in there so we can make sure that we're getting maximum eyeballs. And it's there's some logistical reasoning there. So I think that there's probably some, I get where it's coming from. But more importantly, it does make people check their own distributions and see how
what drives me nuts is when people just refer to smartphones as iPhones. You ever notice people that do that?
That's exactly it. Yeah. And there's a reason for that. It's truly based on the fact of the world we live in. It's just the way people perceive things. Yeah. Silly, but
people call DVRs TiVos and they call tissues Kleenex.
I still do.
Yeah.
Actually, I still call it replay TVs, I think. But yeah. Those were awesome, by the way.
Those were awesome, man. Those were awesome.
Hack the heck out of those.
And that's why they got squashed.
Exactly.
Why they got squashed. All right, well, this next story, last couple of quickies. This one's a follow-up to our last week's review. Mint 14.1 is out. There was a quote-unquote service pack for a couple of, one bug, high CPU usage on Intel GPUs, a DNS resolution problem in virtualization, and the Grub fails to, or installer fails to install Grub on EFI systems. So they've done it. They've issued a new spin, or if you already have Mint installed, you just, run your updates. Just wanted to make that PSA since we just talked about that.
Oh, definitely.
Last week.
All right. Stuff.
This next story is pretty neat. Linux Foundation is getting into the holidays, and they have announced an individual membership drive. And this is a PR announcement that I'm covering, but I kind of thought, I don't know, I'd kind of like to be able to say, I'm a funder of the Linux Foundation. Yeah, I help pay Linus's paycheck.
Sure. Here's the big question. Do you get a decoder ring and do you get an ID card? Because if you get either of those, I'm in, right?
Well, actually, now you don't get one of those, but you get, so I'll tell you the price and I'll tell you what you get. So it's $99 for individuals, and that's an annual. That's an annual. It's like $25 for students, though. Let me see. Yeah, I wrote it down here. So if you're a student, it's $99 for individuals, $25 for students, and it's between now, the day this goes on the air, and December 14th, 2012. And it's only applicable to U.S. members. Oh, sorry, guys. And you have a chance also when you get there to win a $75 gift voucher for the Linux.com store. But here's what you get. Okay, let's see. They have it. It's all in here. You get discounts. You get the Linux Foundation corporate discount for where did it go? I think it's for HP, Dell, and another one. So you actually get here it is, Lenovo. That's what it was. You get employee pricing from Dell, HP, and Lenovo, 35% off O'Reilly books and ebooks, and you also get a variety of other discounts to attend Linux Foundation sponsored events, and you get some publications you can subscribe to, and of course you get to shop at the Linux.com store.
I think if you're active within the community, that's a pretty good value.
If you're going to get one of those systems, or you're going to get a couple of O'Reilly books, and you want to support the Linux Foundation, it's kind of cool.
You happen to frequent the conferences and such, why not? Sure.
I might do it just that way I can say, yeah, I'm Chris, the host of the Linux Action Show, and I pay Linus Torvalds' paycheck.
Just become a student and get yourself
for $25. Now see, it's just how much.
I'm not advocating this. I'm just saying.
I'm just trying to put value on that bit, and I just don't know if it's a $99 bit, but it's definitely a $25 bit. All right, Matt. Well, just a quick news segment because I wanted to get right to our Proxmox review. So that's all the news for this week. All right, you guys, it's time to talk about Proxmox and how awesome it is. And I got a couple of guys on the line that are using it every single day. They're going to tell us about it. But before we get to that, I want to say thank you to System76 this week, who's sponsoring this segment. Of course, you know, I just got myself my new Bonobo or Bonobo. Not sure. Maybe I'll get them to clarify that before the actual review next week. I got my new System76 laptop, and I love it. And they have a holiday special this week. Get $100 off the new laptop that I just got, or $50 off a Sable Complete and Leopard Extreme desktop. So there you go. You also get free hard drive upgrades on select laptops and desktops. It's a great time to get a System76 machine, and thank you to System76 for sponsoring this segment of the Linux Action Show. Now, let me bring on over here. I have Adam on the line and Winfield, who are at an undisclosed work location right now. Guys, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Now, I explained Proxmox at the top of the show as a free software-powered open virtualization platform that is very unique in the sense that it utilizes KVM and openVZ, throws it all through a nice, easy-to-use web interface, and runs on top of Debian. That's kind of like, I think, the total rookie explanation, but maybe you guys could go into a little more detail. What is Proxmox, and why is it so awesome?
Absolutely. Proxmox is a bare metal hypervisor, and like you had just mentioned, it runs on Debian. It supports two types of virtualization. That's KVM and openVZ. OpenVZ, of course, is not true virtualization. It's just container-based virtualization. So it actually gets the added benefit of being able to directly access hardware. Whereas virtualized KVM virtual machines have to go through of
hypervisor.
Yep, absolutely.
So you get raw metal performance.
Mm-hmm, that's correct.
And it's still completely self-contained from the operating system. You can add and install, remove software. You can reboot it, all completely separate. But it's not running through virtualization. It's actually like connected to the Linux kernel, and it thinks it's its own machine, but you get great performance. And that kind of means with Proxmox, you can get a lot more virtual machines on a Proxmox server than you could a fully dedicated virtual machine. So you can kind of weigh the pros and cons of the different approaches and probably get more machines on there, right?
Absolutely. It's very much like the FreeBSD jails that Alan talks about on TechSnap.
Yeah.
There's just some additional, with openVZ, it is somewhat dependent on the host OS itself, the Debian core. So you have to be careful about package updates and things like that on openVZ containers, or it will break the VM.
Okay, well, why don't you guys, before we get to any of that kind of stuff, why don't we start with a quick history of how you guys use Proxmox and a little bit about your setup and stuff like that.
All right, for that, I'll turn it over to Winfield.
All right, Winfield?
So a couple of years ago, we were basically a VMware shop.
Okay.
We have one vCenter server hooked in with two ESXi hosts and running about 20, 25 VMs. We had an offer from our administration to increase that infrastructure, and which was great. Good news, get new hardware. So we started looking into the hardware and the licensing, and VMware was changing their licensing structure at the time.
Yeah.
And that kind of made our eyes bulge a little bit once we figured out what we'd have to pay.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning of the iceberg, and then we ended up having some issues with the VMware, the DR appliance to recover after disaster recovery.
Ouch.
And we were fine, but we weren't real happy with the performance of it. So we started looking around for other alternatives and what we were comfortable with, and Adam had used Prox at a previous job, so we just went down that road. We had tried OpenStack, and it was going into a lot of development and just wasn't as straightforward and easy to integrate for us.
Now, maybe we should back up and mention, because one of the advantages of doing this is you are likely able to utilize VMware hardware, and I think a disclaimer to make for the more casual user out there is Proxmox is a dedicated machine solution. You load Proxmox on a powerful machine, and then you can load a multitude of virtual machines on there at much higher performance than you, say, get with VirtualBox on your desktop. It's a totally different league. So were you able to take your existing VMware hardware and just move it over to Proxmox?
Yeah, it wasn't quite, snap of the fingers, but we ended up having two instances up at the same time, and then you have to do, depending on what the VM is and what kind of file storage it was using, you have to do a little bit of massaging to go from VMware over to KVM.
Now, to do that, we actually used another open source software that you've mentioned before on the show, and that's Clonezilla. Because at the time, Proxmox had not, they did not support VMDK files,
Right.
which is VMware's virtual hard disk image.
Right, right. So you're able to use, you clone-zilled it into a Proxmox VM?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right, so can you give us kind of a quick overview of what your setup is now and how Proxmox is being used?
Yep. Basically what we've got now is we have grown from 2 virtualization nodes all the way to 7 and have plans to increase above and beyond that.
How many machines would you say you run on one of those? How many virtual machines?
We've probably, on some of the individual nodes, we may have upwards to 20 running on an individual. I think grand total we've got close to 50 VMs currently running.
Very nice.
And in our setup, or what's ideal for Proxmox, when you have multiple nodes like that, they're joined together in a Proxmox cluster, and in order to take advantage of some advanced features like high availability or live migration, you have to have a singular point of storage.
Right.
And for that, we've used FreeNAS.
Ah, okay.
With
ZFS, right? ZFS, yeah,
That's
absolutely.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And basically, the 2 storage backends that hook into the cluster right now are Dell T110s. 6 terabyte of storage total each storage node, 32 gig of RAM for level 1 ARC, and we're using SSDs for level 2 ARC and for ZIL.
Very nice. Now, with the ZFS-backed storage, centralized like that, are you able to move a virtual machine between one Proxmox server and over to another Proxmox server, say to like even out loads and stuff like that?
Well, essentially what will happen is that the VM, as long as you have both storage pools attached, the VMware or the VM hard disk image, it's going to stay exactly where it is on that storage node. What actually is going to be transferred between nodes, and what you'll see start to spin up as you do a live migration, is actually an rsync of the RAM. The virtual machine's RAM, and once the 2 VMs have exactly the same RAM image, it'll then spin it up and bring it online on node 2. Or
That's slick. rsync of the RAM. Now, you guys also use a few other open source technologies to manage it, all right? So you're using ZFS, and you take snapshots, I'm assuming, with the virtual machines. How do you manage all of these systems?
A lot of that is done through Puppet. We use both Puppet to manage the virtual machines themselves as well as the Proxmox host. We use it for Proxmox. It comes in handy for keeping the web interface online, because you don't have an agent like you've got with VMware or a client that you go to. Instead, you go to a web interface.
Right, right. In fact, you know what I'll do is, while we're talking a little bit about it, do you have anything particular you want me to show? If you do, in the Proxmox interface, just let me know. I set up a little Proxmox server myself recently, and I threw a CentOS box on there, an Ubuntu LTS, a SUSE box on there, and a Server 2012, all running in KVM. I decided to go KVM on all of these. I gotta say, performance is outstanding, and I just have this running off a laptop.
Absolutely, absolutely. You cannot beat the performance. And as a matter of fact, when it comes down to disaster recovery, fixing a Proxmox VE node is a piece of cake. Since it's just essentially a bare metal hypervisor, all you have to do is reload the operating system and keep going. You just plug back in your VM config files that you backed up, and then just point it back at the virtual hard disk image, and you're good to go.
I love that. I love that. Now, I saw you guys in your notes here had a couple of like Proxmox basics you wanted to cover. Do you want to touch on some of those, or is there anything else you wanted to mention before we get to that part?
Well, there was one little workaround that we've had to come up with.
Oh, all right, a battle-tested workaround.
Absolutely. What one issue turned out to be with Proxmox 2X, sometimes you can run into a bug where the virtual images console will not open. where that you can see the display. And in order to work around that issue, we actually used a little chunk out of openBSD. It's called openBSD or initd. And what that does is it sits there and it listens to a defined port. And once it sees traffic on a defined port, it will execute a command. So basically what we're doing is we can use something like Tiger VNC. And we can go to the Proxmox host with a certain port number, and all of a sudden it will up and show us the VNC's console within the Tiger VNC application.
Yeah, it's so I'm using, I've noticed that too. I'm using the web interface right now for the folks watching the video version, and if I go over to the console section and I bring up, because it's all web-based, so this is the part where it gets a little wonky, but I can pull up the console of the virtual machine, and it loads a JavaScript. Right here I have my, just to be ironic, I have my Server 2012 eval machine booting, and you can see the window doesn't size quite right, and it's a little Java applet, so you have to go get Java installed, make sure you have like the ICE Java plugin for your browser, but it does eventually work, but it's just a little wonky, so you just bypass this altogether.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because if you try to access the web interface on Ubuntu, it does not work at all.
Well, I got it to work, but like right now, my browser just died. It'll die constantly, and you have to have maybe it's because I'm using OpenJDK and not Java.
You'll still run into that issue even if you switch over to SunJDK.
Okay.
We've even had some of the folks within the department run into issues under Windows with it as well. So it does seem like using openBSD initd is the best workaround for that currently.
Well, and once you have the virtual machine installed, you could just SSH or RDP to it, and it's not a huge deal.
That's correct.
All right, should we cover some of the Proxmox basics for folks who are not as familiar with Proxmox and maybe want to know a little more?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, guys, where do you want to start?
How
about what is Proxmox? Should we just start there?
Yeah. Well, again, it's just a bare metal hypervisor that supports the two types of virtualization, being KVM and openVZ.
Right.
The KVMs have the benefit of being able to run virtually any operating system without there being a hiccup at all. openVZ, it will only do Linux-based hosts because it's going to rely on the Debian kernel running on Proxmox in order to run.
But if you did all openVZ, like if Debian was fine, I mean, you could have a ton of machines per one Proxmox host. I mean, think about the power savings and all of that, right? I mean, it'd be substantial.
Yep. Essentially, the only limitations you'd have would be the host CPU and RAM.
And I got lots of RAM, baby.
Absolutely.
And what about the clustering technology? How's that?
Clustering, again...
Easy to set up and everything?
It's absolutely easy to set up. Basically, that cannot be done through the web interface. In order to do that, you have to SSH into, like, let's say we've got just a plain Jane Proxmox. We've got 7 or 8 nodes, and none of them are set up for clustering right now. I would log into one via SSH and run the command pvecm create and then the cluster name. That's going to generate the cluster and the cluster config on one host and get all the configuration files spun up. Then from that point, it would just be a matter of attaching to all the other nodes that would be a part of that cluster, and again using pvecm join, and then just an IP address of one node that is already joined to the cluster.
The chat room's asking a couple of questions about like how you create a openVZ container, and I'll just give them a quick demo. It's so easy. They give you this GUI-based setup, and you just say test, and you put in a password, and it's really just click, click, click. It sounds like clustering is like one of the few times where you do drop down to the command line. Is there more stuff like that where the GUI kind of comes, you kind of come to an end of the road with the GUI and you have to drop to the command line, or is that one of the exceptions?
That's going to be one of the exceptions. For the most part, in Proxmox 2X, you can basically do anything through the web interface, right on down to a high availability setup, which would be kind of a more advanced form of clustering where that you can use IP MI or Dell iDRAC, APC power bars, and things like that. So if one node were to go offline, instantaneously all your VMs would spin up on another node, and your clients would notice very little downtime. And what it would use the Dell iDRAC card for, or the IPMI interface, or any of those other management type utilities for, would be to keep the failed node from coming back online and accessing the virtual hard disk image, which would basically destroy the VM.
That'd be a wreck.
Yep, absolutely.
Huh.
So it is a very smart, very intelligent system.
That is.
And the clustering is really the only time that you would ever have to drop down to the command line. Everything from advanced networking setup, all of those items, storage, backup, all of that can be done within the web interface. But of course, since we're using ZFS, we don't use Proxmox as backup functionality.
Right, you use the ZFS snapshot functionality.
Mm-hmm. And basically we'll do that, and we'll roll it over to a backup node, and we even send it 5 miles down the road to a warm site. That way, if our entire cluster blows up, all we have to do is drive 5 miles down the road and set up another cluster and just reattach virtual hard disk images, and we're ready to rock and roll.
So you run all of your VMs off centralized storage?
That's correct.
And you use backup PC, is that what you mentioned, to pull those off-site, the backups?
Well, what we're using backup PC for is just to pull individual files out of VM.
Okay, that makes sense.
A phone call from one person, they told me, you know, we deleted a file off of, you know, our X drive or something like that. We would be able to go and pull that out and pop it back in.
Yeah.
But for recovery of VMs, or if we need to clone a VM or anything like that, we use ZFS. We're diehard ZFS fans, and it is a huge advantage to be able to CD into a snapshot and pull out yesterday's hard disk image for XYZ server.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Especially if a patch goes bad. Now, a question I've seen pop up in the chat room a couple of times now is, this I will say from Dasani here, he says, are you guys planning to switch from openVZ to C groups eventually?
I've noticed that there's been some chat as far as Proxmox is concerned, as far as starting to integrate, what is it, Linux containers, LCXE, I believe, is the acronym. Mm-hmm. It's a newer form of Linux containers, and they're discussing the possibility of integrating that in.
Gotcha.
I believe it's something that's come up pretty big in Ubuntu's OpenStack environment.
Well, now, we'd mentioned when a VM goes bad. What's the support situation like Proxmox? I mean, it's a download that's free. I don't really know. Is this something I can deploy in my enterprise and then count on support? What's that like? Have you guys experienced any of that?
Currently, right now, I mean, because of our level of experience with Linux, we're not using Proxmox commercial support, but they do make that offering, and it's based on per processor per core. Is the model that they're using.
Right.
They do have a paid-for solution. They also have the Proxmox wiki. You've got YouTube videos. Yep. If you just go onto YouTube and search for Proxmox VE, and primarily what we've used when we've run into a couple hiccups here and there is their IRC chat channel.
Oh, nice.
Yep, on Freenode. If you go to pound Proxmox, generally they'll have at least one developer in there around clock.
Not bad. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that's perfect for the type of people that be using that software. That's how I'd prefer to do it. So any other thoughts, you guys, on Proxmox? I mean, there's a lot to cover. I'll tell you, my impressions were thusly. Crazy easy to set up. It boots up a nice GUI installer. It's click, click, click to get through. So it does take over your entire hard drive, but that's kind of what you'd expect. I put it on there, and within 20, 25 minutes, I'm loading virtual machines. I had 4 or 5 virtual machines on that box within about an hour and a half. I had most of those within the first hour. I mean, it was just Windows. And you know what's great? Windows went on there just fine, and then right next, boom, SUSE goes on there like a champ. SUSE was the best one on there. The screen resolution and the remote console worked the best. And when you combine it with the SUSE gallery, I went on there, it's like, you know what? I want a LAMP server. I downloaded the LAMP server image, put in a Proxmox VM, and I was good to go. I mean, it was like, bam, just out of the box. I had a lamp system set up, totally ready. It's for me, as somebody who in the business has worked with VMware ESX for years. I've been working with it since it's been a product. That's since its inception. And when they, in version 5, introduced that new licensing system, which they're backing off from now, but when they introduced that new licensing system, I had clients bailing. I have clients that never upgraded. And so I've been looking for something to migrate to. And now I'm going to keep, I have this old banger laptop, and I'm just going to keep it, not my new Purdy, but my old banger laptop. I'm going to keep Proxmox loaded on that, and I'm going to be Mr. Hero now. I'm going to stroll into the client, and I'll be like, yeah, I'll just virtualize you right here. Just give me a Cat5 cable. I'll plug it in. I got virtualization in a box. Here's a laptop. And it's a totally portable solution that I can migrate things into while I'm there. I can give demos on. I mean, it's really impressive. And the fact that it's based on Debian, just a sweet bonus for me. I prefer Debian over Red Hat server. So, guys.
And another unique feature, Chris, you just mentioned how that in a second or two you had a lamp set up. With VMware, you generally have to go out to the VMware Marketplace and pull down a VM.
Yes.
Well, with the openVZ templates, right there in the web interface, you just click to access the VM or openVZ templates.
Yeah, when you're setting up an openVZ server, during the setup process, it just says, okay, cool, what template would you like to use? And it just builds the container based on that template. It's so easy.
Absolutely, and some of the things that they have in there are like WordPress templates and things like that.
Yep.
So rather than having to go out to a third-party website and download something right there through the web interface, you can instantly say, well, you know, I've got a business requirement. I need to set up a WordPress box or something like that. You just hit download, hit install. All of a sudden it spins up a VM. You're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah. Guys, any other points on Proxmox you want to cover, or anything else you want to mention before we run?
You all have covered it well. I think it's a great alternative to the VMware solution. You know, if you've got folks that are comfortable with it and are willing to get their hands wet and go under the hood if they need to, then it's done us well, and we've had good luck with it.
Yeah.
That's going to be the huge thing. That's going to be the big difference between VMware and Proxmox, is you have to have folks willing to go in there every once in a while and get their hands dirty. Yep. And
there's always the support, I suppose, if it gets rough. But as somebody who's worked with VMware for a very long time, I was very impressed by Proxmox. A couple little rough edges, but gosh, so awesome. So
for a free product, you can't beat it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming on the show and sharing some of your experience with this. I was really grateful when you reached out to me, because Proxmox is one of those things that you could literally spend years with and still only scratch the surface during your review. So I knew that just me spending a couple of weeks with it would not be sufficient. So having you guys on was a great resource. It was great to pick your brain. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, Chris.
All right, guys. Well, that's the Linux Action Show's look at Proxmox. And that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. But Matt, what do you say before we get out of here? We cover some feedback.
Let's hear the feedback.
All right, folks, thanks for sending your emails to linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the very top of our new freshly redesigned page. All right, Matt, the first email comes from Zell, and he wanted to write us know that he knows that we're fans of great games that make their way to Linux, so he wanted to bring our attention to Pier Solar. It's an excellent game that was released for the Sega Genesis back in 2010. Yeah, like a real physical cartridge game.
Cool.
The reason why he's bringing it to our attention is they're releasing an HD version of the game in a few formats: PC, Mac, and the Sega Dreamcast, Xbox 360, and of course, Linux. And we'll have a link in the show notes. You guys can go check that out. He says, have a great day. And he says his son, Derek, who is 5, wants to say hi. He listens to the show, too. So hi there, Derek.
Well, hello. Awesome.
That's great. All right, Matt, our next email comes from Jacob, and maybe we can help him out. He's looking for a distro. He says, I watch the show all the time and enjoy and learn from it. And I've been using Linux for about 5 years, and I've been playing with some different distros. And I'm trying to figure out a good mix for my 7 computers. I've just started on Arch for about a week, and I'm getting along with it decently. But I'd like to have some more suggestions to try. Sabian was something I was going to try, but I couldn't get the DVD to boot past the bootloader. I'll take any feedback and learn from it. Thank you, and have a good day. Well, Matt, what do you think? What should we recommend Jacob play with?
If he's already going into Arch, we're talking about more, in-depth stuff. Just for giggles, because I think it's worth a revisit. Maybe Gen 2. I mean, at that Arch level of wanting to really customize. And this is you're wanting to build your distribution. I mean, you're really getting in there. Bare knuckles. That's not bad.
Chat room's agreeing with you. Chat room saying Gen 2. I also kind of agree with the chat room when they say stick with Arch and keep learning.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to recommend, just kind of off the wall, go over to the SUSE gallery. Go to the SUSE gallery and just take a look at. There's a lot of different spins over there. And you just go to, what is it, SUSE Studio? Or is it
SUSE Studio?
No, it's not. It's the gallery. It's the gallery. Anyways, go over there and try that, because you can get lots of different spins and stuff. But of course, Gen 2 and Slackware is what the chat room's so hardcore. God, they're a bunch of geeks, huh?
No kidding.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sorry if you're coming in at Arch. I mean, you're obviously willing to take that approach, and that's cool. You know,
very nice.
Definitely, sure.
All right, Matt, the next email comes in from Jack, and Jack says, what about lower bitrate shows? Thank you for the wonderful podcast. I enjoy listening each week. I look forward to learning new commands and being exposed to the new technology that is always included in your podcast. Is it possible, however, to lower the bitrate of the podcast to a reasonable level, like 30 or 40 kilobits, that would allow for folks with low bandwidth internet connections to download and listen to them more comfortably? Anyways, thanks for reading these words with consideration. Thanks, Jack. Now, I totally feel him, because I know we also have a large fan base in Australia that deals with a lot of all over the world, really, but I hear a lot from Australians. So the lowest bandwidth version is going to be the MP3 or OGG file. The MP3 file is slightly lower bitrate than the OGG Vorbis. I'm working on them right now. They went too far in the other direction. I'm trying to balance again on a good sound quality versus encoding. So stay tuned. Jack, it's probably going to be the next couple of episodes, because I iterate each time a Linux Action Show comes out till I get it right.
Well, what's the bit right now? What is it? 64, 128? Somewhere in there?
I was experimenting with a variable 64 to 96 kilobit range, and the issue with that was it broke a ton of MP3 players. There's just so many MP3. They don't support VBR, and so you have to do constant bitrate. But I don't know. I don't know. I try to keep the
getting tinny if you're not careful.
And muddy a little bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah, muddy real bad. Once you start getting into your 30 range, it's pretty bad.
The other kind of workaround that I wanted to let people know about, that's why one of the reasons I wanted to read Jack's email, is each episode is cross-posted to archive.org, which is linked in the show notes, so if you go to the OGG video link.
Oh, yeah.
Archive.org re-encodes to a super low-res version of the show. And you might check out the file size on that. It's video, but it's low-res. You might be able to get that. And the other thing to consider, and I don't know what its bitrate is, but YouTube has like a 360p option, which is a little lower bitrate. It's not going to be 30 to 40 kilobits. I think the MP3 file is going to be your best one.
I'd say so. Yeah, and I think that's probably a pretty good option. So, yeah.
Stefan wants to pick our brains, Matt, about the future. Hey, Chris and Matt. First off, I love Last and watch it every week. Unfortunately, I've been busy when you stream, but I'll be changing that soon. I have 2 questions that hopefully you or the viewers can provide insight to. I'm a Fedora user that has recently switched from GNOME to XFCE. A fellow XFCE user there, Matt.
Yeah. Awesome.
I tried forcing myself to work with the new interface when I realized that that with GNOME 2, it worked for me, and I didn't work for it. Now I have XFCE set up with 2 panels, mimicking the classic GNOME 2. There's a lot of missing from this experience. Well, Cinnamon seemed broken when I tried it, and the other big environments lacked important functionality for me. What do you think the next big choice desktop environment will be? And the next question, do you use SE Linux? There seems to be quite a bit of split in the community about it. What's your stance on SE Linux? So let's answer the first question.
Okay.
What do you think? You think it is XFCE, the big, popular geek Linux desktop?
I think that, or I think it's amongst them. There's obviously more, depending how hardcore you want to go. There's alternatives, but like for myself personally, just based strictly on performance, the fact that I'm able to run Skype right now full screen in Linux and have absolutely no problems with it tells me this is a great desktop option. My CPU usage is handy and all that. So I think it has a lot to go. I think it has a lot to offer for geeks, but I think for the casual user, I think it's probably going to be something like Cinnamon or Unity, honestly.
Yeah, and I just saw that both Mate and Cinnamon were added to the official Fedora repos. So he's mentioned he's a Fedora user, and Cinnamon was, maybe a little broken before in Fedora, but now that, it and all its depths officially will be in the actual Fedora repo, I would think it's going to sort of elevate to maybe not a first-class desktop in Fedora, but a well-supported one.
I think people would be pretty happy with it. Yeah, I definitely think that's a good option. And I think those are the two to watch for newbies. But yeah, as far as the hardcore users, I don't think there's any one to watch necessarily. I think it's more customizable to what meets that person's needs.
I'm actually kind of going through this right now because I'm using Cinnamon on my main computer, but this new laptop that is becoming my main computer is running Unity. Now that after 2 weeks of not using Unity, now that I'm back to using Unity,
right.
Guess what? I like it again. I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to stay here again. It's funny. I bounce around. What tells me is all of these desktops are getting really good. They just have a few more things missing that, you know, that I end up sort of jonesing for after a while. And I kind of get this grass is greener symptom. And I'm jumping around. But both Cinnamon, Unity, and probably even Mate and XFCE, if I use them more, are all kind of at a point now where it's like, well, I can make any of them work. Now it's
That's true.
You know, it's kind of a preference and, you know, resource considerations.
Well, for myself personally, just one last thought. It basically is on my netbook, for instance, I do run Unity, and I'm very happy with it. You know, I actually got chat up in Unity right now, and it's working really well. On my main desktop, though, it just, you know, like I said, I don't think there's any one definitive answer. I think it's something you got to kind of get your feet wet and find out what's working for you personally on each individual machine and kind of find in your sweet spot.
And we all know it's all going to be KDE anyways, right?
Of course. Yes. Always KDE.
It's always KDE.
Always KDE.
All right, Matt. Well, two more quick emails to bang through before I want to just give a little couple of closing thoughts on my new laptop.
Yeah.
Nathan writes in, hey, last was it 2 weeks ago when we were reviewing Ubuntu on the Nexus 7? I made the offhanded comment that I think the perfect setup would actually be able to dual boot Ubuntu and full-fledged Android on there. Well, Nathan writes in and says, you can. He says, you can dual boot the Nexus 7 ROMs with Ubuntu, and he includes a link to the XDA developers forum. He says, perfect world has been granted, because I said in a perfect world. So if you guys are trying that, now I've taken Ubuntu off. I'm gonna wait a little bit. You know, Android is the appropriate operating system for the Nexus 7. That said, I'm going to keep an eye on it, you know, and I'm going to put Ubuntu back on here. I'm going to try different window managers and stuff like that. So it's all good, but and I'll probably try the dual boot solution at that time. So thanks, Nathan. But we'll have a link to that if people want to try it.
Oh, one thing before we forget, SE Linux. I think.
Oh yeah, gosh, completely forgot.
Next chat room.
do you struggle with it much? I know you're not a big Fedora user, right?
No, I don't really have any. I'm pretty agnostic on it, honestly.
You know, it's interesting. All of the clients that have CentOS and Red Hat Enterprise Linux have it off, now that I think about it. Not that I've disabled it, but they do all have it off. I generally turn it off on my desktops because I don't want to hassle with it. My take is this. If you have a public-facing system, it's probably worth leaving on.
Well, that makes sense, yeah.
You know, if it's hosting a website or hosting a database, hosting an IRC server, whatever it is, something that's listening to remote connections, yeah, it might be worth having it on then. If you're on your desktop and you're behind a firewall, it's maybe not as necessary. It's gotten better, you know.
True.
I'm still kind of the opinion to turn it off. But that's just my opinion. And, you know, experiment and see what works for you.
Different strokes, different folks.
All right, Benjamin writes in. He says, I'd like to suggest that you guys talk about the Linux startup process. He says, hello there, last team. I'd suggest you talk about the Linux startup process. It's really interesting, and there's a few points which one or two other Linux users would be interested in, I think. From a press of a power button to the BIOS post, phase over to the stage 2 bootloader, and then the kernel, and thus the init/systemd. It's full of interesting facts, which I really enjoyed and informed myself about. Here's some resources which he used to learn about it when Arch was switching over to systemd. So he includes links to that. He says, P.S. I'm a big, long-time fan of the show. Keep up the great work. Awesome. And P.P.S. I'd be happy about feedback, what you guys think about this suggestion. So, the bootloader thing sounds super dry. The whole boot process sounds super dry. However, there is actually some very interesting things going on between the different distributions, and a lot of distributions are adopting systemd. Arch is switched over. Red Hat Enterprise Linux will be switching over. Fedora, you know, a lot of adoptions. However, Canonical shipping Ubuntu with Upstart. Still a widely deployed system. Upstart's making some changes that might break some compatibility with other distributions' init systems. So there is definitely some interesting things. I'm watching all of them, and when Matt and I think there's something that's really meaty to dig into on the show, I think we'll probably do an episode on it. But we're just going to wait. We're just going to keep an eye on it. So
we'll keep our eyeballs out.
All right, Matt. Well, that was the last email we're going to get to today because it's too long of a show. Well, we're going to do hopefully extra emails next week because I know I didn't get to. We got We got so much email this week.
So much stuff.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. But we're going to save some of it for next week, and feel free to keep sending it in. Now, before I get out of here, I just want to give you some of the first impressions about my new laptop, because I know a lot of people on Twitter and Google Plus have been wondering. My first takeaway impressions are it is a big machine. Here it is. If you're watching the video version, it's big. It is a desktop replacement in every sense of the word. It has a massive GPU in here. It has a Sound Blaster XFI sound card in here. It has tons of USB on here. It has a thumbprint reader. It has a huge 17-inch screen that's 1920 by 1080. It's got an SD card reader built into it. It's got audio in and out ports up the wazoo. It has a subwoofer built into the bottom of it.
Oh, you got a sub in your notebook, dude! Seriously,
it has a subwoofer built into the bottom of it.
Nice.
So I'll tell you more about my particular config. This thing is a speed demon. As a recorder, the biggest issue I've had with large laptops has been sound.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I have another large 17-inch laptop, so I'm familiar with the 17-inch laptop form factor. It works well for me because I need a lot of horsepower, and I like having a dedicated number key too. And they're always too loud, Matt. They're just, there's a lot of components in this thing. When this system is just sitting here today, all day running, and it is not getting picked up at all. It's quiet, and when you really push the GPU, the fans will kick up, but even then, it's been really reasonable. I was playing Trine and Serious Sam 3. And, definitely some fan kicks up, but there is this really intelligent, I don't know how well it shows up, but there's some really great fan vent holes in the back. And the way the thermal system works on this laptop, and this is the part that I'm really thrilled to talk about, is it stays relatively cool to the touch all around. So
they've got heat flow going in a proper direction.
Yeah. I mean, even though there's a monster i7 in here and a monster GPU in here, there's a couple of spots where it's warm, right? But I've literally had 17-inch laptops where they get so hot that you can't put your hands on them.
You need a cooling pad just to function, right?
Yes, I do. I have a 17-inch laptop that I cannot run it for any serious task without its cooling pad. Yep. So the other thing that I just noticed about it is the trackpad was my other concern, because trackpads, I think Apple makes a really good trackpad. I think they sort of exclusively make good trackpads. I don't really think pretty much anybody else, with maybe the exception of Lenovo, makes good trackpads. This is a good trackpad, and it's a single button trackpad, but it still supports right and left click, multi-touch scrolling, and all that kind of stuff. And it has a finished texture to it.
I can see the reflection. It looks like it's very flush with the rest of the notebook. Very flush.
It's kind of got almost like a pattern on the trackpad that gives it sort of a tactile feel. So you get a sense of where your finger's at on the trackpad. It really works pretty well. Too. Yeah, in fact, I find myself using the trackpad over my regular mouse. That I have a little micro mouse, but I don't really find myself using it very much.
Well, I think that's a telling thing right there. The fact that you're drawn to the trackpad over the mouse, that would be an indicator that clearly they did something right there.
The design too. There's a few things I'll talk about more. I like the audio. I want to get into more. The design of it is. System76 seems to have stepped it up, and I'll probably reiterate some of this, but stepped it up to a next quality level. The build quality and the look of this thing is very nice. It has sort of a brushed aluminum finish around the keyboard, and then a soft matte black for your hands to rest on, and it feels good on your skin because it's kind of
you got a nice
nice texture to it.
Not
so
slide all over the place.
So that I'm really happy with, and then the one last sort of just immediate. These are all first impressions. I've only had it for a couple of days. I was a little worried about keyboard sag. When you type, it's a good full-sized keyboard, and this is up there as one of the best laptop keyboards I've used too.
Oh, really?
So some of the things, sound, fan noise. I was worried about fan noise. I was worried about trackpad. I was worried about keyboard. I don't have an issue with any of those things.
Oh, that's
all my first impression. So I will be running through some official benchmarks, loading games on here, timing boot, things like that. I'll tell you guys about all of the different hardware I put into this thing and give you my full impression next week on Linux Action Show, after I've had some time to really put it under its paces. But, Matt, I've already, just as a test, I've already wiped it from the stock image and reloaded Ubuntu 12.10 on there just to kind of see, what's the experience like if it's not a factory image? Is it going to work? Am I going to have any, driver issues, anything like that? No. You know what? Everything frickin' works, Matt. And I tell you, to have just everything work so well is so nice. It's just not even the troubleshooting thing is just not even a factor in it. So
it's just gorgeous looking.
It's got a really good finish to it. I really like the edges of it. The other nice thing is it's one of those laptops where you can open the lid and it doesn't bring the whole machine up. You know,
I hate that. I got that. I got a netbook like that. Yeah.
No, they've got a good balance on the hinges where it's sturdy enough that it'll stay wherever I want it, and it has a lot of play. And it's got a good grip to it, but it's also it gives enough that it doesn't rip the whole machine up off the desk when you try to open it.
Well, it looks like it's got man hinges. None of these dinky little things. It's got. I'm talking man hinges.
It does. It actually, the way the edges of the screen are tapered, and so what that lets you do is that you very easily just slip your I just do a thumb. You just slip your thumb in there to open it.
Slick.
Yeah, so it's really easy to get it to open and close, and of course,
it's when you're opening it from a corner, it doesn't like some netbooks or notebooks will actually kind of get cockeyed. It stays even the whole way up and down. I like that.
Yeah, I like it a lot. So I'm pretty happy, boy, and having the Steam beta invite at the same time was like perfect storm.
Score. I mean, jeez.
Yeah. All right, Matt. Well, what do you want to mention before we get out of here this week? You have anything to plug?
Yeah, as always, you can find me at datamation.com. Just go to the open source channel. I think I've got a Ubuntu app roundup in there. I believe that was my latest article, and I'll have more stuff coming up Monday and Tuesday, of course. And as always, you can find me at matthartley.com for legacy articles. And here, one of these years, I'm going to have some new stuff coming up there as well.
There you go. Now, see, the chat room is assuming that System76 is paying me to talk about this laptop and put it here, but it is not.
We're long-time people.
Yeah, I paid for this fully out of pocket. I would have bought it if they were a sponsor or not, and they are not paying me in any way to put this on the table. This is going to be my last rig. My Linux Action Show rig from now on. Starting next week, I'll be driving all the show visuals from this. All the show prep this week was done on this. This laptop will power the Linux Action Show, and that's honestly one of the reasons I wanted a ton of horsepower.
Yeah.
The big show takes a lot of computer, Matt. That's just the way it is. All right, well, before we get out of here, I just want to let folks know that Jupiter Broadcasting has a monthly newsletter. You probably already knew that. We call it the Jupiter Signal. If you haven't subscribed, you might want to for the month of December. We'll probably have shows moving around as a result of holiday schedule, and we'll be announcing those in that mailing list. So that's one. Of course, we'll try to mention on the shows too, but the best way to stay apprised is just to sign up for our monthly newsletter. Go over to bit.ly/Jupiter Signal. That's bit.ly/Jupiter Signal. Or I might, if I'm a good boy, I'll try to put a sign-up form embedded in the show notes.
Yeah.
And you sign that up. We just sent out the November issue because November just wrapped up, but we'll be sending out the December issue earlier in the month to give people a heads up on our holiday schedule. So, all right. Well, just a quick reminder, join us live on Sundays, 10 a.m. Pacific over at jblive.tv, or download the show Sunday afternoons over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. You can find links to everything we talked about. And, of course, a big thanks to Adam and Winfield for coming on the show.
Huge.
And talking about Proxmox. That was
awesome stuff.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning to this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. And we'll be right back here next week. Bacon. Get started. I'm excited to talk about Proxmox. The last segment. And 3. And 2.